Actually, I can open the discussion by reframing maybe this discussion a little, or framing it for that matter, because this session will actually discuss a topic that has been on the table ever since we started the day before yesterday. So the discussion is to discuss higher education partnerships for the global goals, not a small topic. And the higher education partnerships for the global goals are identified, as we said a few times already, in this important frame, transforming our world, the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. Higher education and research, as we know in this room, but we're not always sure that people outside of our rooms do know sufficiently, but higher education and research do play a key role in addressing these goals, and thus in processes that will lead to a more sustainable future. And IAU, as this global association of higher education institutions, as being the global NGO associated to UNESCO and many other UN organizations, and these goals, has worked on advancing education and research for sustainable development now for some 30 years. IAU contributed in particular to UNESCO work on education for sustainable development all through the UN decade on education for sustainable development. And today, after the Aichi Nagoya conference in Japan, which ended with a beautiful conference to celebrate the achievements of a decade on education for sustainable development, saw the launch of the Global Action Program for Education for Sustainable Development. As well, IAU has been very much involved in the higher education or education for all programs, which resulted in the Incheon conference. And there as well saw the launch of a new program looking at education for all in a different, broader dimension. And now IAU is also involved in that follow-up through the work on SDG 4 more specifically. But as far as ESD and HESD is concerned, and our relationship to UNESCO, IAU is a key partner network to the UNESCO Global Action Program on ESD. And we're a lead organization on work that we already alluded to and that we probably will discuss in this session as well, the whole of institution approach to higher education and research for sustainable development. And the discussions that we will have here are linked to this. So those who attended the session IAU in brief yesterday saw the launch of a global cluster on higher education and research for sustainable development. It brings together 16 universities and organizations from around the world to each lead the work on a particular SDG. All three presenters here are connected from very close by or a little bit more remotely to this cluster. And this is what will be the beautiful part as well. So we will start by listening to the person who's maybe a little bit more remotely connected to the IAU Global Cluster on Higher Education and Research for Sustainable Development, yet UNESCO is definitely a strong partner of this. And Ushio Miura, who's the program specialist of UNESCO Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education in Thailand, has been with us a few times now, the IAU conferences. Those who were at the general conference in Thailand may remember her excellent speech there. And it is a great honor for us to have you with us today, as you represent UNESCO and much of the work that's being done there as lead organization also in advancing education for sustainable development. UNESCO has led the decade on ESD, for that matter. It resulted, as I just said, in the Aichi Nagoya conference to really take stock of all the strong dynamics that took place there. EFA as well was led by UNESCO, the whole work there, and it resulted in the Incheon conference. And today, thus, this Global Action Program on ESD and the global education monitoring activities. So it is very important to hear from you some of the examples and some of the work that's being undertaken. And you have chosen to focus in on something that is absolutely essential. We were struck, or I was struck this morning by what the students said on the first panel, on the last panel of the last plenary panel, but the first panel of today, that the student said that he didn't really see a position for himself in the debates and discussions in Agenda 2030, and certainly not in everything that has to do with climate change. And we have to ask ourselves, how come? How is that possible? How is it that a student today doesn't see that he or she has a key role to play in that? And then we have to question ourselves and to call for that question that Zulkifli Abdul Razak also called for this morning. What's the purpose of higher education if it is not to capacitate our students to take up these broader agendas and to see their role in it? And so what is interesting is that Ushio Miura will focus and zoom in on one particular aspect that may trigger that next step in a very proactive way. And you will look at teacher education and give us a strong example of what can be done there. So thank you very much. I give you the floor.
Thank you so much for the very clear introduction and useful introduction. My name is Ushio Miura, as introduced just now, and I come from UNESCO Bangkok, which is the regional office, Asia-Pacific regional office of UNESCO for education. And by Asia-Pacific, we encompass countries in Central Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, South Asia, and West Asia, very, very diverse in every sense. Today, we, where's the screen? You can see. Ah, yeah. So people can see the, oh, sorry. And so people can see? Yeah. Okay. Outside on the two sides, sorry. Today I'd like to speak about the interface between universities and multi-stakeholder collaboration in integrating Education for Sustainable Development, acronym ESD, in higher education, and focusing especially on teacher education. I will discuss this through some experiences from the project that we at UNESCO Bangkok recently implemented in Southeast Asia. So this project, which was implemented in 2017-2018, with involving 25 universities and teacher education institutions from 5 countries in Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos PDR, Philippines, and Thailand. This was a part of the Global Action Program on Education for Sustainable Development, GAP, funded by the government of Japan. And the objective of this project was to empower teacher education institutions and universities in Southeast Asia to generate and engage in change actions to integrate ESD in teacher education. We began this project with the premise that ESD is transformative education that aims at reorienting societies towards sustainable development. This is a quote from the Global Action Program on ESD framework document. And that ESD is to be pursued through these 5 pillars of learning, which I'm sure you are all aware of or are familiar with. Learning to know, learning to be, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to transform oneself and society. In other words, at the heart of ESD is a commitment to ongoing learning to change for sustainability. And this implies that teachers would also need to learn to generate change and strengthen their capacity to engage in change in order to be able to practice ESD. So from this perspective, we put universities as the site of change for sustainability and asked the project participants to undertake change projects within their own institutions, within their own universities, to integrate ESD in education through an action research approach. I'd like to emphasize that the project took an action research approach and did not undertake action research. In other words, it followed steps that are similar to an action research process as illustrated in this diagram on the screen. The first step, as you must be all familiar with, the first place is reflection analysis of current situations and practices, and from which the participants identified an entry point for ESD integration within their own institutions and planned change actions. Then they acted on the plan and implemented the plan. Then we observed the process of the action taking place. Then we conducted evaluation, which led to further reflection on the next actions. Usually, an action research process is made up of just one cycle. The innovation of this project was that the cycle moves on to another cycle, and in the next step, the participants were to disseminate this change approach to other educators and other universities and institutions. And this dissemination step, the move to the next cycle, is what made this project particularly innovative and responsive to ESD's 5th pillar of learning, which is to transform oneself and society. This pillar, learning to transform oneself and society, requires that the project participants need to go beyond just bringing change to their own respective institutions, but also reach out to other institutions to expand the change movement for sustainability to broader community and society. As the participants went through their change actions, we began to see some key principles and strategic elements needed for successful change actions for ESD integration. And those elements and guiding principles were elaborated and put together as a step-by-step guide. The link to this publication, the guide, is you can see on the screen right now. And this guide also includes examples from the actual experiences of these universities that took part in this project. One of the key strategies for successful ESD integration that emerged from this project experiences was, in fact, multi-stakeholder collaboration, in particular, community participation. As I already mentioned, the project saw universities as the site for change for sustainability. And sustainability takes shape in context, so does ESD. Therefore, identifying entry points for ESD integration and implementing a change action necessarily required and involved situating the university in context and understanding and implementing ESD integration in context. And that context includes communities in which the university is situated. So in the process of implementing change projects, community involvement and participation emerged and developed in many cases. For example, the University of Phnom Penh in Cambodia and Suphanuvon University in Laos. They were both new to ESD. They were not familiar with the concept of sustainable development or education for sustainable development. So they found their entry points in extracurricular activities for students to undertake. At the Royal University of Phnom Penh, there was a pond of wastewater on campus, which was creating all sorts of problems and became a source of unhappiness for everybody on campus. So they began a cleaning project through solar-powered oxygenation process and also planting plants that can help clean water. And as the students and faculty members, some students and faculty members began to implement this project and the pond became a bit cleaner, more people became involved, and some tables were placed along the pond as study areas, and a cafe was opened as well. And now the area had transformed into a social center for students, faculty, and community people to relax, study, and enjoy. And you can see how such an initiative can grow and develop to transform the environment and livelihood on campus through multi-stakeholder collaboration and involvement. At Suphanuvon University also, some student volunteers began Say No to Plastic Bags campaign because lots of the trash found on campus came from plastic bags used for food and snacks. And then the students began to realize that the problem of plastic bags could not be solved just by talking to their peer students. They realized that they need to also talk to people in the market, in town, and they spoke to market vendors, involved them. And then this activity also began to expand to recycling and composting and campus gardening, which also began to involve other stakeholders in the community surrounding the university. While these two universities' actions, because they were new to ESD, were more ad hoc, the University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia, which also participated in this project, presented a model of more institutionalized integration of community participation for community collaboration for ESD. It is a course, a required course for all students called Community Service Learning Program. And students are sent to communities across the country in groups. Each group is made up of about 20 students for 2 months over a period of 3 to 5 years while they're at university. Every year, that means they would go out to communities in groups and to work with the communities to analyze problems in the first year and develop approaches to solve the problems in the second year, and then implement the approaches in the upper years. These groups of students are guided by, each group is guided by a team of faculty members coming from various disciplines, covering all they call cluster faculties of the university. And through this program, the university annually sends out more than 7,000 students to around 260 communities in the country. In fact, the actions, the problem-solving actions conducted by each student group is funded by university's grants. There's a set university grants funding for the students to implement these sustainability solutions, actions in communities. This is also an example from the University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia, but this project inspired our project participants greatly by presenting a model of creating a movement, because this project that we implemented broadly aimed at creating a movement for ESD by reaching out to others, by spreading this change approach. And the UGM project on the Indonesian river restoration movement, this was greatly inspiring for us. It was a community-based and community-led river restoration movement in river communities in Indonesia, involving now 58 river restoration networks in more than 150 communities across Indonesia, and the secretariat is hosted at the University of Gajah Mada. This was initiated by the university in 2015 as a collaborative network between academics and communities to restore the life of rivers in Yogyakarta. But as it grew, it became more than just a university community collaboration, because the university recognized the need to engage and work in partnership with a wide array of stakeholders, including relevant government agencies, NGOs, expert associations, the private sector, and the media. At the local level, the coordination and management was conducted through meetings with the external stakeholders, and for networking among different river networks around the country, the communication coordination was accomplished through social networking applications like WhatsApp. And the university acted as the secretariat, also organized river schools, what they call river schools, jointly with communities to develop knowledge and expertise for restoring the life of rivers. And then it also invited community members to seminars in the universities to share knowledge and widen network. So this experience demonstrates university's crucial role in mobilizing multi-stakeholder collaboration for sustainability through both research and education. If you'd like to read more about various stories of change undertaken by the participating universities of this project, we have published short feature articles on our website, which you can read through these links. Finally, we are also, together with ProsperNet, UNUIS, our office is implementing a project on higher education institutions for the local implementation of the SDGs. For those of you who are not familiar with ProsperNet, it is a regional Asia-Pacific alliance of higher education institutions committed to integrating sustainable development into postgraduate education. And the 4 universities which are the members of this ProsperNet, Keio University in Japan, Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Terry School of Advanced Studies. And they have undertaken case studies on the local implementation of the SDGs and turned the process of the case studies into a higher education curriculum and learning program. Through the case studies and through this project experience, it also emerged that community and multi-stakeholder engagement is one of the key guiding principles for the local implementation of the SDGs. And if you'd like to know more about this project, we recently shared the outcomes of these case studies at a conference at Chulalongkorn University called Bangkok Forum, held at the end of October, and you could read about it through this link. And so that is the end of my presentation. And for more information on UNESCO Bangkok, please visit this link. And we are, UNESCO as a whole, we are currently conducting a public consultation on the position paper for the post GAP ESD for the future of education for sustainable development. You could perhaps also read this position paper and give us some comments. You can find the paper as well on this our website as well, on the page of Education for Sustainable Development and Global Citizenship. Thank you so much.
So this is very nice because it connects very strongly with what has been discussed already here. And in particular, I would highlight the notion of guides. We need guides, and there are guides out there. It resonates very well with what John Thwaites yesterday from Monash University in Australia presented on the guides on how to get started with universities. And so this is a very nice set of guides that are being developed, and that are not only being developed to be taken up like that, but to be adopted and adapted in the different contexts. And it provides with very nice examples. So that's also what we're always calling for, and that's what the IAU also wishes to do, and that's what the lead institutions in the cluster are also working very hard on. The other key topic and key term that you used was the multi-stakeholder approach to everything that we do. We see that not only in the topic of this conference itself, but also in the work that each of you in the room and as participants are doing, so very important. And then that relates to the term mobilization. So these three, I wanted to just pick up from there and then move on to offering the next speaker the opportunity to present on this as well. And just briefly, let me introduce Dag Rune Olsen. We had the very great pleasure to meet at a very important event that you also created to mobilize all these different stakeholders out there. And you will probably talk to it, but the University of Bergen has started and initiated a new series of conferences called SDG Bergen, and I had the very great pleasure and honor to be there last year for the launch of that event. And it resonates with much that has been said here, that we need to not only involve the universities very strongly, but through the platforms that are being created to build the bridges with all the different stakeholders out there. You were the dean before of the Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences at the University of Bergen, and before becoming the rector since 2013. Previously, you were also the director of research at the Norwegian Radium Hospital in Oslo and a professor in medical physics. Your research interests are radiation therapy. Maybe there is a link there with multi-stakeholder. Possibly. You radiate out now on many different issues, and it's very essential, the work that you do, because it's not only based now in Bergen, but you reach out globally. But you did that for a long time before, but now by formalizing and by doing the kinds of things that you do, it gets to an even higher level. So you published over 120 scientific papers in international peer-reviewed journals, as well as book chapters and popular scientific works. You held a number of international offices, organized several international meetings and conferences, and you've been a member of the editorial committee of various international journals. So your experience in the field is essential to the developments that you're now undertaking and fostering. In 2008, you were awarded the Claes Breuer Gold Medal for your research and elected to Academia Europea and the Norwegian Academy of Technological Sciences. You're the current head of the Research Policy Committee in the Norwegian Association of Higher Education Institutions and a member of the European University Association's Research Policy Working Group. So it's interesting because you combine not only the research and very strong research part, but you also move now much more in using that to facilitate this networking of initiatives. And we're looking very much forward to hearing how you do that.
Thank you for that kind introduction, ladies and gentlemen. When the United Nations adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, They also agreed upon one of the most courageous and ambitious goals in recent history. The 2030 Agenda, with its 17 sustainable goals, the SDGs as we call them, well, they are actually a guide to how to deal with the grand challenges of our time. Clean energy, climate change, food and poverty, social inclusion and health, educating the youth, peace and good governance to all countries and to all people. Yes, of course, these goals and the agenda is ambitious. And knowledge is critical, both to understand, but also to develop strategies and actions to meet these goals. Peter Thomson, the then President of the United Nations General Assembly, fully understood that and realized it. Because in April 2017, I think it was, he wrote a letter to all leaders of higher education institutions around the globe. His message was quite clear, I'd say. Everything I've learned, he wrote, has convinced me that the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda provides humanity with the best chance we have to shape a sustainable way of life for our species upon this planet. It goes without saying that young people are the most capable of the transformation required, having the most to gain or lose from the success or failure of the agenda. I therefore make this sincere request to you to make these goals an integral part of research and teaching at your institution. Thomson, well, he actually called for knowledge. He called for research and education, and he called upon university leadership for a sustainable future. So what is actually the role of universities in this setting? Well, I could, of course, then start off with quoting Nelson Mandela, who said that education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Obviously, education is very important, but so is research. And of course, already today, universities, they do provide teaching education, and they do conduct research that is highly relevant and crucial for the Sustainable Development Goals in order to meet them, in order to understand them, in order to tackle the grand challenges. A survey published in Global Policy Journal December last year showed that close to 90% of all academic staff agree or strongly agree that their own research and or teaching is of relevance to these goals. 90%, close to 90%. That's not too bad. University engagement is perhaps not so much about then establishing a wide range of new courses and launch new dedicated research programs. Perhaps it's about the coordination, integration, and also the contextualization of our research and our education. Realizing that most of these activities, one way or the other, will actually underpin the goals. At my institution, that is the University of Bergen, we have launched a strategic initiative to engage with the SDGs, which of course includes education, research, but also external engagement and leadership. Without external engagement and leadership, education and research will not, to its fullest potential, contribute to the understanding and to the transformation that is needed to meet these goals. The global challenges then that the 2030 Agenda and the development goals are meant to tackle are highly complex. That is important to understand. That again, of course, challenge the way we teach, the way we educate, the way we learn. Solid disciplinary skills and knowledge is obviously needed. In, for example, material sciences, you would like to develop more efficient solar panels for greener energy solutions. But also knowledge about entrepreneurship, economy, legislation and culture will be crucial. These are all important if you are, for example, are setting up a solar power plant, let's say abroad. It's not only about the hard sciences. Education for sustainable future, in my opinion, therefore has to be interdisciplinary. There's no other way. At our university, we are currently reviewing all our educational programs to see how the 2030 agenda best can be addressed and included. We design and we redesign programs to offer education that is suitable for addressing the 2030 agenda. And I'm happy to say that this review was actually initiated by the students themselves. In fact, just last week, our Department of Biological Sciences launched the first 2 new courses dedicated to the SDGs. These courses focuses on the SDG 14 and 15 respectively. But it is important to underline that courses from a Department of Biological Sciences dealing with the SDGs cannot only be about biology, ecology, etc. It also needs to include social sciences, humanities, and law, for example. The 2030 agenda also requires leadership. I'd say young leadership. For centuries, the Royal Norwegian Navy has provided its naval officers with training in leadership on board tall ships. Knowledge of naval operations, teamwork, responsibility, well, that's key to leadership at sea. Our university will build on this long tradition in Norway when we now bring our university students on board Norway's largest tall ship for a course in sustainable leadership. This way, our students will learn teamwork, leadership in practice, combined with an academic education whilst sailing the oceans of this globe. The development goals also challenge the way we conduct our research. Again, highly complex questions and challenges cannot be dealt with in a purely disciplinary manner. Technologists, biologists, economists, philosophers, well, they need to come together to discuss how feeding a growing global population can be achieved in a sustainable way. Behavioral sciences are needed when the perception of climate change amongst the public is to be understood in order to form policy making and in deciding what actions to take, what actually works out. Moreover, our research methodologies, I think, must also be revisited. And if we look at some of the methodologies that has been quite successful, reductionism or reducing complexity, well, of course, it is well proven and turned out to be a quite efficient research strategy, in particular within natural sciences and medicine, I'd say. But increasingly, they do fail when highly complex issues are to be investigated and understood. And here, there's clearly a role for the humanities, social sciences to play the role of, let's say, integrative sciences, providing a different way of analyzing complex questions that can complement the natural science and life science and medical sciences way of conducting research. All sorts of challenges, but also possibilities to move research and science further. The Millennium Development Goals that preceded the SDGs, well, they were successful in very, very many ways. Poverty was reduced, so was child mortality, and infectious diseases such as Ebola has been tackled. But there is some unfinished business, ladies and gentlemen. The SDGs and the 2030 agenda are not merely a version 2.0 of the MDGs. The SDGs and the 2030 agenda is radically, and then I mean radically different in the way that the SDGs are all collectively to be met, not one at the cost of others, which was the case to a certain extent for the MDGs. In that way, the link between social, economic and environmental dimensions of sustainable development are emphasized. Obviously, this makes the SDGs more demanding, but also more ambitious, and appealing from an academic point of view, perhaps. And that call for an in-depth and comprehensive insight into the complexity of the goals, requiring a systems approach rather than a traditional reductionistic approach. Last February, the University of Bergen hosted a unique conference that was also referred to by the chair of the session, a conference on the Sustainable Development Goals. The conference was the first of its kind, bringing the university community together with ministers and politicians, governmental and UN officials, civil society, and representatives from private industries and businesses. More than 300 people participated and discussed, vividly so, how we can contribute at the science policy interface, which is obviously required for the goals to be met, the goals of the 2030 agenda. During the meeting, it was announced by our Prime Minister that the conference would be an annual event, and it's sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Education and Research. Our engagement also includes science diplomacy and science advice, with scientists participating and contributing to high-level meetings at the UN in New York on the development goals. I think it's fair to say that the involvement of students is a prerequisite for success when working with the Sustainable Development Goals. This was clearly illustrated when our students hosted Bergen International Student Conference in April. The theme of the conference was Climate and Society, Transformations in the 21st Century, and it was a great success. These students connect directly to our strategy in a specific initiative called the UIB Collaboratory. The goal of this initiative is to facilitate interdisciplinary and innovative workshops, courses and conferences, and all driven by the students themselves. Building on the position as Norway's premier SDG university, the University of Bergen has established leadership through a national committee for the 2030 agenda. The committee consists of leading Norwegian research universities and also official representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Education and Research. Last month, on the UN Day, it was officially announced that the University of Bergen was given the task of being UN's ocean science hub, and thus responsible for the SDG 14, that is life below waters. Of course, this makes us proud, but also humble with respect to the task. And yesterday, here on this stage, here in Kuala Lumpur, IAU launched the cluster of higher education institutions for sustainable development. This, to my mind, clearly demonstrates the need, but also the willingness of higher education institutions to engage. Even though, of course, my university takes a special interest, for example, in the SDG 14, life below waters, it is probably SDG 17, partnership for the goals, we should highlight today. Partnership brings stakeholders together. We must work across borders, across sectors and disciplines, across the 17 goals. Ladies and gentlemen, the former president of the UN General Assembly, Peter Thompson, he called for knowledge. He called upon universities to take a leading position, and he called for action. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, you're much taller than I am to do something about this. Very nice, very, very nice. I have to tell a little story here, because this famous letter by Peter Thompson, you remember how this all came to Bergen. Actually, Peter Thompson's office called me one day and said, you know, we've heard that you have something of a database and you work with universities from around the world. I said, yes, that's true. We do. We happen to be connected somehow. He said, yes, I heard something of a database. I said, you mean WED, the World Higher Education Database that we started way back in the 40s, and which now has grown into this huge database that we know with 18,000 higher education institutions? Yes, that's it. They said, we would like to use it to disseminate a little letter by Peter Thompson. Okay, send us the letter first. We'd like to see what you say before we share the data of these higher education institutions that we value a lot. So the letter comes to our office. We're a bit puzzled. We think, okay. We tweak it a bit. We send it back. We said, if you frame it like this, we may consider. And we may send it out. The letter finally is approved by the offices, and we agree to use the contacts that we have in the WED and send it out to 18,000 higher education institutions. What happens next? Somebody at the University of Bergen, we've been working with long time, first time in Egypt in 2005, and since then on and on again, Thor Halvorsen, University of Bergen calling. Hi Thor, what's happening? Well, we received a letter from Peter Thompson, and Peter Thompson calls for action from higher education institutions and invites us to come to New York. And we understand you send a large IAU delegation to New York. Can we be part of this? The rector sends me. Okay, I said, interesting. Actually, not a very large community that we do send to New York, but if you would be willing to represent the IAU in New York at the meeting, that would be even better. And that's how Thor traveled all the way to New York. And that's how all the rest happened at the university. And that is really a very nice way of having this exchange and this positioning. And we're very grateful that you took it up so strongly, because it made a huge difference after that as well for us to also advocate even stronger for higher education and research for sustainable development. So it's very interesting how these things are actually little graines de changement, as we say in French, these little seeds of change that are so essential and make a big impact in the longer run. And it refers also to you, Ushio, when we met in Bangkok. After that, I went to Gajah Mada, to that conference, and I met with the people, and we worked on that water project that you were alluding to, and that led to other little seeds of change, and it builds these dynamics, and you're here again today, and I'm sure that with the panelists, it will make a difference. Because this leads again to what our next speaker will be talking about, also water issues and issues that are at the heart of everything that we do. So the Peter Thompson letter refers to something else, and you open with his letter and you close with it, because you had one key theme and word in your presentation, and it was the word leadership. It's the leadership by UN organizations. It's maybe the leadership of IAU, if I may be a bit pretentious in pushing the university in a direction. But it's the leadership of institutions. It's your position as a rector that is absolutely key, without which that involvement would not happen. It's leadership inside of all the institutions, all the institutions director at the different levels. So all the leaders, what they take up and how they do it. Then it is the leadership of the professors. They lead the way for the students. And the students as leaders is absolutely essential, and that we hear very clearly in your presentation. And then the other word that I would pick out of this is the interdisciplinary approach. We've talked to it a bit, but you put it at the heart and the center of everything that is essential to make a difference. So multi-stakeholder, but multi-stakeholder inside the institution as well, and that's the whole of institution approach, and that is what it makes it also so important to embed and the interdisciplinarity approach, making it the whole of institution approach a reality, and to transform the education in a way that we see on all these panels that you had the opportunity to discuss, that you see in the panel here in the room, and that you had the opportunity to discuss. So thank you for that and for bringing these dimensions already, the two of you. So we go to the third presentation, and we're very pleased here to go back to maybe another very concrete example of something that is happening thanks to the university involvement. Masoud Parsinejad You received your BSc and MSc degrees from Utah State University in the US and your PhD from University of Alberta in Canada. Already 2 continents, Tehran, US, Canada, already an opening to different approaches to higher education, which probably has influenced your whole life. And that's what the students here are calling for as well. You are an associate professor at the Department of Irrigation and Reclamation Engineering at the University of Tehran, teaching and conducting research generally in the field of agricultural water management. You are also collaborating with Urmia Lake Restoration Program on a national mission to restore the desiccating salt lake. You're also acting here as the representative and the contact point for the University of Tehran, as having accepted the leading role for SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. And you make the link to that by presenting a project on the drying salt lake in northwest Iran. And I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before I start my talk, I would like to make 2 comments. This talk was scheduled to be given by the Chancellor of our university, Dr. Neely, who had to leave early for another conference in Taiwan. I am not an administrator of a higher education institute, nor am I a social scientist. I will not be able, therefore, to go into details of theory and definition of higher education impact in society. I have therefore structured my talk to touch upon higher education partnership and also multi-stakeholder engagement in the context of a case study related to the line of my expertise, namely water management. The second point is, yesterday I attended a session that 3 high-ranking universities presented their institutions' achievements based on common grounds of intelligence, science, technology, entrepreneurship, financial support, dedication, and competition. It is very challenging and rewarding to introduce or develop on high-tech innovations. But I would like to say it is somehow more challenging and complicated too. For example, to be able to find a decisive and effective method to mobilize stakeholders in a new path that they do not tangibly appreciate, and even worse, they may think it as to be contradict to their immediate income and well-being. Problems that deal with directly masses of people and under ever-changing natural environment is both multidimensional and complex, therefore very challenging. Stakeholder engagement has been used as a governance instrument to achieve water policy outcomes, to improve efficiency, sustainability, and equity, to prevent conflicts, to manage trade-offs, to raise awareness. Therefore, stakeholder engagement can improve accountability of decision makers and service providers and support result-oriented actions. It is supposed to replace the old top-down hierarchical model, traditional role of government as the single decision-making authority in water policy has been replaced by the large number of stakeholders that contribute to water management. Gradual involvement of public, private, not-for-profit sectors. Obstacles facing engagement of stakeholders include lack of proper analysis, importance of policy tools to scale up success stories for bench learning and enhance their replicability. When we talk about sustainable water management, both in supply and sanitation aspect, competing demand for water resources, balancing demands to achieve sustainable water management, success depends on involving all stakeholders within the basin. Stakeholders include community, individuals, elected representatives, regulators, agencies, end users, name it, everyone within the community. I'm using an example, a case study of a Lake Urumia in the northwestern of Iran, which has been drying up due to mismanagement of water in the basin. The lake surface area has declined from some 6,000 kilometers square to some 2,000 kilometers square since 1995. And the decline is generally blamed on drought, increased water diversion for irrigation, for irrigated agriculture, and mismanagement of water. As you can see in the pictures, the agriculture has increased by threefolds in the last 3.5 decades, 4 decades. And as you can see in the picture, the green spots are the growing cropland used. And on the right picture, you can see that a number of dams have been constructed, and it has prevented the natural flow of the water to the lake, and it has been the main reason for desiccation of the lake. It shows that how unsustainable agricultural growth has been in the region, and in the bottom picture you can see that how illegally the water is being withdrawn from surface water. So basically all the natural rights of water to the lake has been prevented. This is the picture of the lake being, the level of the lake being dropped gradually, and on the right picture you can see the number of wells, irrigated wells, how extensively it has been increased. So the water consumption and withdrawal has been quite unsustainable in the last 3-4 decades. And other than the water problem and desiccation of the lake, because of the dust forms, which extends to hundreds of kilometers, there has been many lung disease and problems within the region, and it is quite a populated region nearby the lake, and restoration of the lake is not only important to the sustainability of the environment, but it relates directly to the health and well-being of the community. State and local communities have been participating, and in fact, a restoration program has been formed to administrate the restoration program under direct supervision of the country's presidency. 6 cabinet ministers are board member of the ULRP, the program that supervises the restoration of the lake. The program is considered to be a national priority, and all the residents are the main beneficiary of the program. Contribution of all stakeholders, particularly local residents, is an essential parameter supporting implementation of Urumia Lake Rescue Program successfully. All stakeholders, especially agricultural sectors, are expected to participate effectively in implementing the program and to cooperate completely on decreasing the volume of agricultural water consumption and also supplement of the water right to the lake. Continuous and regular monitoring on preventing any development in agricultural sector is essential, and also preventing illegal withdrawal of groundwater and surface water. There has been a study by FAO done in 2013 comparing the sustainable agriculture indicators in Aral Sea Basin and Urumia Lake Basin, and basically all indicators have been very weak and ended to unsustainable situation that has been created in both basins. Higher education has been involved in this program to resolve the problem or find solutions, and a leading national university has been assigned to take over the task, and they have been mobilizing top experts from different disciplines among all national universities to this program, and technical working groups have been formed. Financial supports are being given to postgraduate students to encourage them to study on the ways to tackle the problem, and international universities and agencies, FAO, JICA, ICARDA, and other universities, USU, Australia, and different international universities have been involved in the problem, and the project has become a role model for how to directly employ higher education in national projects. However, higher education involvement has been limited to conducting studies only and produce solutions for various problems, but it has not been extended, the role has not been extended to implementation of solution and monitoring of the implementation. And with respect to the participation of stakeholders, technical committees have been formed on water and agriculture to promote a stakeholder participation in implementation of the project, meetings with the school community and officials to act as promoters to increase public awareness to reduce water use in agricultural sectors have been taking place, conducting workshops to train local advocates on lake restoration has been formed, introducing alternate employment, especially in southern region of the basin, for the farmers and the agricultural stakeholders have been introduced. Subsidy from government in different forms have been given to compensate for the reduced incomes of the agricultural sector. Plugging illegal irrigation wells is underway, and installing flow meters on irrigation wells to monitor the rate and the amount of water that is being withdrawn has been underway. But there is still, I was told that we should raise a question at the end of the presentation. I would like to make this remark that when you are dealing with a problem that involves a large number of stakeholders and the objective of the project has to do with restoration and preservation of ecosystem and environmental quality, these objectives do not necessarily and directly coordinate with the immediate income and well-being of the stakeholders, namely the farmers. This is a challenging and complex issue, how to mobilize them. It is often much easier to do a job right and at the first place as compared to undo a mistake and correct it. Life is not like typing on a computer.
We have an important red line and lifeline here between the three presentations. It is about water, and water is the issue of the future. We drink water here in bottles. We know that we cannot drink it for many from the tap. Is that a problem for today and for tomorrow? It is. And so we hear it from the first presentation. You're heading all the discussions on water and the oceans, life underwater. Now we hear it from this example in Tehran. From your presentation, I would again see that the notion of leadership is absolutely essential. But the other part that you also touched on is, what is the role of the university in better informing the policymakers? Or what is the role of lifelong learning, for that matter? You name the issue with those who, the agriculture sector, not really understanding or willing to understand. And so how to educate them? What kind of innovative approaches to that can we trigger and also bring them back to university somehow, or for university to get out there to better explain what is happening. So many challenges that you face. And so the partnerships is something that you underlined very strongly, and what is also a red line in our presentation this morning. And the notion of education. How does that work? And who do you involve, and to what level? And how can you involve others in the process also, so that what is happening today, as you say very rightfully, undo things and destroy is easy and goes very fast, but reconstruct is much more difficult. And we have to prevent Punitive, you said, is one thing, but maybe education and finding other innovative ways would also be on your agenda, I guess. So what we will do now, I will have 2 questions to the panel very quickly, and then we will have 3 questions from the room. We started half an hour late. We will go a quarter of an hour over time, if you agree, because we gave you more time for the coffee break and a little less for lunch. So the 2 questions are very easy ones. No, they're not. Do you see the role of higher education in the societies as being fully recognized? And how does it resonate with the many different levels of decision makers, leadership that you mentioned? Is it recognized properly? Is it heard? And how does that work? And I will ask the second question right away. How can we ensure that higher education is not confined to SDG 4, but that everybody sees that it is really part and parcel of all the goals and a key partner in its global entirety for all the goals? Who would like to start?
Thank you. Very pertinent questions, obviously. When it comes to the first one, whether higher education, and if I may add, research or knowledge as such is recognized in society, I think that varies. But there has been a trend, a development in the view on higher education and research, which I think is worrisome. Early on, it has been mentioned the fake news and the disrespect for expertise in our societies. I come from a country where our Prime Minister states that knowledge is going to be our new oil. In Norway, of course, we produce a lot of oil, and that's very important with respect to the income to the Norwegian society. But there's a clear notion that knowledge is the new oil, that is a knowledge-based society is going to drive also the economy. I think that's good news, because it shows the importance of knowledge, and then, of course, education and research. And also when it comes to, definitely when it comes to the SDGs, I think there is no way we can deal with these without having a solid knowledge base. And that's also not only about the politicians to recognize the importance of higher education and research, our institution's role, but it's also it's a bit demanding for us as well as institutions, because one of the things that I find very intriguing, fascinating, exciting about the SDG and the interplay with the universities, and that is that we have to disseminate the knowledge in totally different ways than early on. We have to contribute to informing policy development. So the science policy interface that I mentioned in my introduction, I think it's very important that we are completely untrained on, let's say, or not unable, but we're not really up to it as I see it, but we have to be. We have to be willing to take the step towards providing that kind of knowledge to inform policy making. I do see that in a number of countries, also in Europe, that the recognition of higher education institutions is, I would say, threatened, and that is really, really worrisome. Your last question, or your second question, and that's the SDG 4, education. I think it's obvious that education from school to university is important, and we educate teachers, so we should undertake that task or do that, of course, in a proper way. But I think it would be a limitation if we looked at the university's roles only to educate teachers. I think that if you look at a university with all the various departments, disciplines, whatever there is, and in a comprehensive university, you have so much knowledge, so much to contribute to all aspects of society, and therefore all SDGs. So I urge us not to limit ourselves to SDG 4.
Would you like to react?
Yes, I would agree also that the role of higher education in SDGs is not fully recognized broadly. by the sectors outside higher education. But then I think there's the challenge that we have, one of the key challenges that we found in our project with ProsperNet is that there is a wide gap between the meaning system of people and the scientific knowledge systems. What I mean by that is even if higher education experts and researchers go into the community and explain about the SDGs, they don't click in the minds of people. Sustainability is about everyday livelihoods, the realities of livelihoods. So there needs to be some kind of recognition on the side of higher education, knowledge and research. There needs to be a clear understanding on the side of higher education that there needs to be a strategy for bringing different knowledge systems together, not only simply bringing in scientific knowledge, academic knowledge into communities and in the society. So that is a big challenge that we found in our project.
Yes, I would like to make a comment that in many societies, universities do their own work and the government does its own. And they are not directly interlinked, and they are not in the reference with the university to raise questions and problems and ask for the solutions. They are university graduates, but they forget that whatever they know is from university and higher education, and their role can be empowered if they repeatedly go back to the universities and ask for questions on the problems that they are facing. This is not institutional in many cases, and this is quite preventive, I would say.
Would you like to say something about getting out of SDG 4 or not? Just so that you know. So I would like to turn to the room and ask who would have a question for the panel. I'm sure there are many, so it will be for you to pick and choose which one to ask. Yes, please. There's a microphone. There's a microphone if you wish, if you can introduce yourselves briefly, who you are, where you're from, and then the question.
Well, thank you for your valuable talks. My name is Muslah Dohoki, president of Dohuk University in Kurdistan region of Iraq. My question is to Mr. Najat from Tehran University. Mr. Najat, you mentioned that one of the obstacles facing the engagement of the stakeholder is the lack of proper analysis. What do you mean by the lack of proper analysis, or why you consider it as one of the obstacles? Thank you.
And then we take the second question. We will take the 3 in 1. If you wish to maybe stand up there, please, in the middle, and your name and institution, please.
All right, Lilian van Hoof, University of Antwerp, Belgium. I'm looking here at Sustainable Development Goals, and I was listening to the very excellent speeches of our panel, and I was just wondering, you know, when I hear all these things sometimes, and I'm going to be quite frank and outspoken like I usually am, it is quite woolly. It makes me think about the General Assembly of the United Nations very often. And I'm just wondering that we as researchers, as professors, don't have to be more frank and say, let's say, we have global governance. What can we do in global governance? What should we do and how should we implement it? What should we do in regional governance? What can the European Union do about the SDGs? How should we implement it? What should we do? What can our government do? And what is the policy? What are our recommendations? What can our universities do? And can we implement it? Instead of pushing it forward and not having any action and a lot of talk. I'm always thinking we are a bit short of action. I don't know how to do it. Maybe you have some ideas, and I try to think about it too. So this is my big question on the SDGs, like on the Millennium Development Goals. And what do we do as universities? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this panel did provide some very concrete examples, but we will state them again. So if I can give the floor to the lady first and to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Mokosi from Botswana Accountancy College. I found it very interesting when one of the presenters spoke about having the SDGs learned within the institution and also having as students take part in it. So my interest would be, at what level do you put in those strategic initiatives to have different faculties lead the different SDG goals, and also the student involvement? Does the student involvement also influence their research project, especially in collaboration with industry? Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question for now.
Thank you. It's more of a comment. My name is Peter Friberg from the Global Health Institute in Stockholm and University of Gothenburg. I just want to focus briefly on SDG 16. I think we keep forgetting that goal. We are talking about institutions, we're talking about trust. And it's usually quite easy to speak about the more specific goals like 14, 15, and climate and health and so on. But I mean, to be able to twist the effects of those, you have to consider not only the partnership of the 17, but very much so the SDG 16. And I think that should be brought up very much more. Thank you.
Please state it again, what SDG 16 is for those who don't know in the room.
Well, it's peace and conflict for the first, but then you have the institutions, it's the corruption and all these things.
Very good.
Which is extremely important when we discuss all these goals. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Who would like to take the floor?
Before I answer your question, as the leading institute of SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, I extend our invitation to satellite universities to join our cluster. The invitation is still open, and we welcome to you to join us. And as far as the proper analysis of the problem, the stakeholders, and in our example, the farmers, look at their own immediate income out of their job. And basically, when they are so dependent on the agriculture, they are not fully recognizing how important sustainability of environment and like restoration of a lake could be for the future generation. They are after increasing their own income and getting as much water to their land. And that's the contradiction between like environmental sustainability and well-being of the stakeholders. That's what I meant by that statement. Thank you.
I do think that universities actually conduct a lot of activity that can be considered as action and not only words. At my university, we've for many years been conducting high-quality climate research that has fed into the reports for the Intergovernmental Climate Panel. I think that's important to establish the relation between, or the link between CO2 emissions and the temperature increase. We know a lot about these things, and of course what to do next is to look for mitigations and also green solutions and technologies for renewable energy, which is also something that universities are engaged in. For example, in our country, offshore wind is an alternative energy source which we conduct research with respect to. So I think we contribute substantially in a number of ways, not only providing or discussing and providing arenas for debate. But I do think it's important to say that universities has a role to play. Politicians has another role to play, and it's important for us to provide knowledge, insight, guidance, but it is also the politicians that is going to decide upon the policies. Otherwise, we will let's say, or their responsibility must not be eased. It's for us to provide knowledge and insight, but politicians make the policies. I think also it's fair to say that a lot of students has, in contrast perhaps to earlier generations, are really, really engaged in how to change, how to take action. And I think some of the things that we see at our universities as well is that they want to engage with industry, with the public sector in a much more active way. So students these days, of course, they are intrigued by problems from science, purely from the scientific point of view, but also with respect to the societal implications, relevance, and responsibility. So I think that's also, perhaps that's the most important thing, or most important component and contribution for universities, and that is the younger generation and their solid engagement.
In terms of the question on the level is that the level of education or the level at which SDGs should be integrated in learning? Okay. Learning for sustainability, it has to take place everywhere, and not only just in a portion, in a part of society. So that would imply that it has to be at any level. It's not only that it can be at any level, but it has to be at every level. And about the question on SDG 16, I think it's a very important question. In our region, in our project experience, it was very clear that in some countries in our region, the higher education curriculum is even decided by the national government. And lecturers do not have discretion over deciding their syllabus even. In those cases, it's very difficult to take this change approach that I shared with you today, because the educators in general in higher education systems, institutions are not empowered to create change within their institutions. So definitely it's a necessary, required dimension that needs to be addressed as we all pursue sustainability through higher education research. Thank you.
Time is flying. Unfortunately, I'm sure this triggers other questions. It is already almost 10 to 1 if my watch is correct, or 1:45. And we may be at risk of being not thanked for being too much over time. You may wish to have lunch. So now it's my turn to thank very strongly this excellent panel, and it should trigger more discussions over lunch, so please do speak with them. Thank you very much. We have a little gift that we would like to give you on behalf of the university, and I will invite the student to give it to you. We have had strong discussions with her. She's involved in many, many things here at the university, and very dedicated to also contributing to transforming higher education from her end. And thank you for that. So you're involved in the future. So thank you to all, and wonderful panel, the start of much more.